You and I have to look at this and understand this, that the ballot is as powerful as the bullet.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Hi, welcome to episode 70 of Only Human. I ran across a quote this week from a lady named Toni Morrison. And here it is, and we'll talk about it in some detail afterwards. If there's a book that you want to read but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. The same is true in any endeavor. If the solution you seek doesn't exist, create it. So that's the guiding idea of today's episode. If something doesn't exist, a book, a business, a solution, a movement, maybe even a community, maybe, just maybe, it's because you or I were supposed to create it. And that's kind of guided me for a long time in my writing career, my research career. I look for something that usually is generated by some sort of frustration. You know, dang it, there should be something that makes this easier. There should be something that makes this more interesting, right? And then slowly but surely, I learned some of the skill sets on how to take it from that frustration into the creative space of making something new. So today I want to talk about how we turn frustration, I wish there was a solution for this, damn it, into innovation. How we take the next step of being afraid to start and turning that fear into action. And then most importantly, taking that ideas, and we all have a lot of ideas, right? How do you take ideas into reality, into the real world? Think about this for a second, because this happens to me all the time. Have you ever searched for something, whether it's a product, a service, a group, an opportunity, anything, and just come up empty-handed, right? I mean, you think you could go on Google and find everything, right? But you can't. What if we viewed that not as a dead end, but as a signal, a sign that maybe we could build something and bring it into existence, right? I'll share a few stories along the way. I've got a couple of inventions I'm working on right now, and a couple of insights, and hopefully by the end of this short episode, it's my goal to convince you that if you're waiting for something to be built, you might as well just get started on building it yourself, right? Here's my first example. I've got a lot of those little sticker things that grow in my yard. They're thistles, right? If I let them grow all the way up, they're thistles. But they start out as these little sticky things that you step on in your bare feet, and they hurt like heck. And they grow all over my yard. And so there's a lot of little sticker pullers, little handheld things with a fork on them that you can put down there and try to pop them out. But it doesn't take long, even with the best pair of gloves, until you can't get it. And besides, there's literally, these things are everywhere in my yard, especially about this time of year. So then I found one that was longer, right? It was, it's got a hoe handle on it, but the same little two-pronged thing on. And I jam it down there, and then I got to pull it up, and and I said, what this really needs is a little lever on the bottom of it, a rounded piece of metal with a foot lever, so I could stick it down, push it in, and then just rotate it down, and it would pop right out. So I built one. And I used it about 5 times, then the metal piece broke off. And so then I built a different one. Then I realized you couldn't attach it to a wooden handle. So I'm working on a fiberglass handle now. But the idea is that tool, there's versions like it, but it doesn't use the rounded back end to pop it off with leverage. And I've been working on it now for, 2 years, trying to find that one thing that I can get it so it'll work perfectly, and then maybe, mass manufacture it, go on Shark Tank, sell it to the world, right? I don't know. But it frustrated me to no end that no one had come up with that solution yet, or at least not one that I found that was actually workable. Here's another thing. And somebody already invented this one, but it took me a while to find it. I have little dust bunnies of dog hair all over my house because I have a lot of dogs. And so, I mean, I can vacuum all that stuff up with a little handheld vacuum. I don't do a lot of it. My beautiful wife does most of it. But we can do all of that, and literally by the time you're done, there's more, right? And so we looked all over the place for different things, and we bought a lot of stuff to try to solve that problem. And eventually I just got used to living around little piles of dog hair everywhere. But this company recently came up with a broom whose bristles are rubber, right? And it's a little flat broom with rubber bristles, and rubber bristles pick up static electricity as you sweep it along the floor. And it sucks the hair into it, right? In and of itself, that'd be wonderful, except that wouldn't take too long, and you'd have to clean it off and do it again, and you have to clean it off. So they paired it with a little stand-up vacuum cleaner, really powerful vacuum cleaner that senses when you bring the broom up to the bottom of it and sucks the hair right off the broom. It's the coolest thing ever. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth it, right? So it's another example of somewhere somebody else with dogs thought, man, there's got to be an easier way to clean up this dog hair. And I want to come all the way back to what this podcast is all about, right? We've said so many times it's about growing where you are with the resources at hand. But to what end? Right? So what if we get more powerful and wiser and more capable? Why are we doing that, right? Which brings us back to the whole idea of purpose, that we're put on earth here for a reason. And in this particular case, it may seem silly, but offering that solution, that book that hasn't been written, that invention that hasn't been invented, that service that no one else does, those are ways that we can take our personal growth and give it back to the world. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to talk about today. And I want to kind of walk you through the process that more or less has grown organically inside of me over the past few years, and offer it up as a way that you might consider, and certainly would be looking for any ideas that you have. But we all know that feeling of wanting something to do something easier or better, something to be more entertaining, but it just doesn't exist, right? And it leads to that frustration, just like we talked about. And most people stop right there. I'm frustrated with this, right? Others, like we've talked about, decide to take the next step. Is there anything that I can do? Can I create something to fill this gap? So that's segment one here, is on seeing the gap, right? J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, she loved fantasies. She loved reading fantasies. And she ended up writing the Harry Potter series because she was fascinated with magic and wizards and youth. And so she decided to write the book that she wanted to read as a child. Right? And it turned out she wasn't the only one that was starving for a book like that. Sarah Blakely, I don't know if you know that name. She's the inventor of Spanx. Right? She wanted shapewear, things that could make the bulges smoother and everything. So she ended up taking this spandex material and creating an entire empire out of comfortable shapewear. Right? Probably the best example, although maybe not the best example for today because of a lot of the politics that are going on, but Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk isn't the richest man in the world because he's just some sort of brilliant engineer. What stands at the very beginning of Elon Musk's riches was this idea that he could see the internet growing like crazy and all of the economic opportunities that it presented, but people didn't want to put their financial information on the internet. And so he created a code that would allow people to confidently share their financial information, their credit card numbers, on the internet and buy things, right? And that was PayPal, right? This was a guy that, with a couple of other smart people, said, this is a problem that if we solve it, is going to help a lot of people, right? And that was the original font of Elon Musk's riches. And he got so excited about that, he started looking around at other things, right? He saw the NASA. He's not a rocket man. He's not a space guy. He didn't have any background in that. But he's always been interested in Mars. Right? And he looked at NASA and he said, at this rate, we won't get to Mars in 100 years. So he started SpaceX. And he dumped all of his money into it, something he really didn't know about, but he knew it was a problem that he wanted to solve. And we've all seen what's happened with SpaceX. It's going to make NASA obsolete if it hasn't already. Another example from Elon, he saw the ridiculous expense of building tunnels for roads. And so he built a great big ground eating machine called a borer, and he created the boring company. Next time you go to Las Vegas, go down under the convention center and ride in the tunnels that Elon's created. And now he has reduced the cost of boring tunnels underneath the ground by well over 1,000%. Crazy. Doesn't stop there. Elon looked at paraplegics and quadriplegics that could no longer move, and he looked at robotics, and he said, what's missing is a direct brain link to those robotics. So he created a company called Neuralink, and there are paralyzed people today that are moving and walking. And soon that could become the norm. Right? Neuralink. So all of these examples are an example of somebody seeing a gap, right? J.K. Rowling, Sarah Blakely, Elon Musk, maybe you, maybe me. What gaps do you see? And what would happen if you decided to lean into it and try to fill one of those gaps? Well, I can tell you what would happen. The first thing that's going to happen is you're not going to take the next step, right? Because fear kicks in. I'm not an expert. Somebody else would have certainly thought about this if it was a really good idea. I'm not an inventor. And if I started something like this, it'd probably be a waste of time because there's no way that this could succeed. And from my own experience, when I very first started writing, and I've shared this story before, I'll keep it short. I was simply trying to answer a question: what is airmanship? Right? Pilot stuff, right? And it had come out in an accident investigation that said this fatal accident, two people that I knew very well, I was an instructor pilot for, had died in this accident. And the last line said, at the end of the day, this was simply a failure of airmanship. And I didn't know what that meant. And it turned out that nobody really knew what it meant. And I thought, since nobody knows what it means, somebody has to define it. And I set out to start that process. And it took me 5 years. And it ended up in a book that became the #1 selling book in aviation trade. And I wasn't a writer, right? I had all of those fears. As I sat down to write it, I'd share them with my wife. I don't know, nobody's going to listen to me. I'm not an expert. This is just a lot of work for nothing. I'm certain somebody's done this work already. Right? All those things crept in, but I kept going. And every one of these ideas that we get starts out looking like a crazy idea, right? Walt Disney, right? He was told at the very beginning that a theme park based on kids' stories would never work, right? Jeff Bezos started out with a used bookstore online. Hey, you've got all these stores and malls. Why would anybody buy used books online? And that was the beginning of Amazon. And he went from building the model off Broadway, this small little used bookstore, into who Amazon is today. I'll go all the way back to the Wright brothers. Man, what did they know about airplanes? Nothing. What did anybody know about airplanes at that time? Not much. These guys were bicycle mechanics that said, somebody's going to build an airplane. Why not us? Right? So it's cool, right? And at the end of the day, each and every one of those people, I guarantee you, had a fear of failure. And that fear can be recast into a different mindset, right? Is your fear real? Is it based on reality, or is it just a resistance to the unknown? You don't know how to do this yet. You're not exactly sure how it'll turn out. And even if it turns out exactly like you think it should, nobody else is liable to buy into it. Man, that's what innovation and invention is made of, those doubts and conquering those doubts. So how do we conquer those? I'd like to just be really practical on how I do it, right? You don't need $1 million. You don't need a team of experts. But what you do need to do is take that first step. And that very first step is write it down. What's missing? And my sticker weed pulley thing, what's missing is a fulcrum that I can use as a lever as I push down on a handle that will pop out this weed and not destroy the ground around it, right? So I wrote it down, right? Prototype it, test an idea, right? And I'm now on version 4 of my sticker weed puller thing, right? And I'm nowhere near at something that actually works, even as well as the things that I have. I mean, I still use the old ones, the ones that I could buy from the hardware store, because my new one falls off sideways and I haven't been able to figure it out yet. However, once you do begin to figure something out, you have to find a way to get feedback from somebody other than yourself. In my writing, I always have a trusted group of people that I can send something to, and they will give me straight, honest, objective feedback. It's not always flattering. It seldom is, right? But you share your idea with others, and then you refine it. They have to be trusted, right? Because if I can ever build this sticker weed puller thing, I think I'll sell a lot of them. So I don't want anybody stealing my idea. So I got to trust it with people that I don't think will do that. And then the last step. So far, write it down, prototype it, test it, get some feedback, and then commit to a long haul, right? Because it's going to take probably multiple revisions. Your thinking will change as you come up against different obstacles. And then the last step, I say kickstart it. And I mean that both metaphorically and literally. Obviously, there's that whole Kickstart app out there where you can put down your idea and get other people to say, yeah, I'd like to be part of that, and help you fund it, right? But there's other ways to kickstart an idea, and that is to say, I have now got this to a place where I'm ready to go out off Broadway somewhere and see whether this would have an impact, whether this would fill a need, or whether this would capture somebody's interest. Personal example, I am delving into the young adult reader authorship, as well as kids books, specifically kids books for dads to read to their kids. And I've got a few of those out there being read right now by people that I trust, to see if there's an appetite, a thirst, a hunger for it. And if there's not, I'll either go back and refine it, or I'll set it on the shelf for a later time. I never throw anything away, right? But I'm not an expert in any of these things. The Wright brothers weren't an expert in aviation, right? They were two guys that started small. They had instant feedback with each other. They had complementary personalities, right? They built gliders. They tested them. They failed. They crashed. They adjusted, and they tried again. Right? That's how creation works. Right? it's messy. It always starts small, but it starts. And that's a key thing. That's the key thing. If the book isn't written, write it. Well, the first way you begin that is you put a line down on a page, right? I always like writing the first line and then do an outline. You can write an outline and never get around to finishing it, but if you write that first line of text, and you've started something. So the next thing I think we need to think about is how do we move from being a consumer, somebody who wants someone else to invent it, to a creator. And I'm like most people, I want somebody to create what I want, right? I want to be able to Google it up and find it. Okay? But the innovator in me, I want to make it happen. I want to do something that I know will fit my every need, and hopefully, therefore, others will see it that way too. I can give you a couple of examples that you know all about. Airbnb. It started because two guys noticed that hotels were overpriced, mostly during conferences, and that they were bland and boring and not always the nicest places to stay. So instead of continuing to complain, they created a solution, right? Initially, they rented out air mattresses in their apartments, right? And that tiny idea grew into being a billion-dollar company. Rent out part of your house or an empty house for people who don't want to stay in the traditional hotel, who can't afford it, or who have been, basically got there late and there's no more rooms at the end. Or how about Uber, for that matter? Go all the way back to Sam Walton at Walmart when he said, man, what if I could take all these products and put them under one roof? All of these things started with somebody that didn't have a lot of expertise in the area, looking for a solution to a common problem. So I'd like to kind of wrap this up with a call to action for you, and it'll be a fun one. Here's my challenge. What's the one thing that you wish existed? And if you sit down and think about it, it won't probably just be one thing. Think about, some type of entertainment that you wish you had. Think about a tool, a process that you wish you could find or that existed. Might be a business. Might be like I said, a tool. It might be a new type of community, right? I want you to brainstorm how you might go from that need to proposing an idea that you might be able to turn into action, even if it's the smallest little thing. I'm going to take the same challenge, and when we come back next week, I'll offer up a few of the things that I've taken the next step on, that I've identified. In the meantime, you can email me if you've got a couple of ideas. I promise you I won't steal them. I won't share them, but I'd love to see them. My email is just tony@convergentperformance.com, tony@convergentperformance.com. Maybe we'll put this on the screen for those of you that are watching. And when you take those steps, we'll talk about this a little bit further in the weeks to come. Just keep in mind the fact that the future belongs to those who build what they wish existed already. And that's been such a successful formula for all the people that we've talked about here that were sort of normal, average people right up until a moment when they weren't, because they decided to take action and meet a need that they personally had that eventually rolled out into the world. So that's it for episode 70. Kind of a fun one on how we go from being frustrated to being inspired to being innovative to planning, testing, getting feedback, and growing maybe something that could benefit the entire world. So until next time, like always, grow where you are with the resources at hand. Be creative and keep building things. We'll see you soon.